The day my mother died, something inside our home went quiet, not just in the way death brings silence, but in the way betrayal lets rot grow in the cracks. I was 16 when she passed, cancer, quick and cruel. She had been the softest part of our house, the only one who ever asked me how I was, the only one who remembered my piano recitals or brought hot cocoa when the storms rolled in. My father had always been a figure of shadow and weight, and my older brother, Jason, had always been the sun to him. Loud, bright, brash, and blinding, the kind of child who never heard no. When Mom was gone, I wasn't just grieving. I was suddenly small, invisible, disposable, but she hadn't left me with nothing. A week after the funeral, her lawyer reached out. She had left behind a modest inheritance, about $38,000, saved carefully in a separate account and explicitly in her will, left to me. Not to be touched, not to be shared, just mine, just in case. She had written in a handwritten note attached to the will, "I want you to have something that's only yours, for school or life or dreams." I remember crying when I read it. It was the first time since the funeral I'd allowed myself to feel anything other than anger. My mother had seen me. She'd made sure I would have a piece of security, a future, a cushion, a little bit of love and dollar signs. But love doesn't last in a house full of takers. By the time I was 19, the inheritance was gone. I found out in the most humiliating way possible. At the financial aid office of my community college, trying to apply for a grant. They told me the balance I'd listed didn't exist, that the account had been closed 2 years ago. I walked out of that office dizzy. I called the bank, I confirmed the account number, and then I saw it, one withdrawal, $37,846.42, memo, vehicle, and my stomach sank. I didn't even need to ask. I knew exactly what it had gone to. Jason's goddamn truck. A Ford F1, 150, black, lifted, chrome everything, obnoxiously loud. The kind he had been bragging about online. He'd bought it cash, flaunted it all over social media. I'd thought it was suspicious. At the time he didn't have a job that paid enough, and Dad was constantly complaining about money. But now it made sense. They used my inheritance to buy Jason a truck. When I confronted Dad, his response was as dry as the air in that house. "Don't be dramatic. It was a family decision. You're young. You've got time to make your own way." I was shaking, staring at him across the kitchen table. "It wasn't yours to use. It was mine. Mom left it for me. It was sitting there," he snapped. "You weren't even using it. Jason needed a reliable vehicle. Reliable vehicle. That truck had LED ground lights. You stole from me." I whispered. His face hardened. "I raised you. I fed you. Don't talk to me about stealing." That night, I packed my things. No one stopped me, not even Jason, who had the audacity to wink and say, "You'll get over it. It's just money." But it wasn't. It was the only thing my mother left me, and they'd gutted it, smiled while they did it. I worked the next 6 years like my life depended on it. Because in many ways it did. I worked full-time while finishing school part-time. I took freelance jobs, moved into a shared apartment, lived frugally, and learned how to stretch a dollar until it begged for mercy. I never went home, never called, never replied, but I watched. From a distance, I saw Jason crash that truck twice, rack up a DUI, lose his job, and eventually move back in with Dad. 2 men aging badly, trapped in the same small house, one bitter, the other broken, still treating the world like it owed them. But I didn't want the world to punish them. I wanted me to be the one who did it, quietly, legally, and sweetly. By the time I was 25, I was making enough to qualify for a mortgage, and I heard, through a cousin, that Dad's house, the same house Mom had raised me in, was in foreclosure. He was behind on payments. Jason wasn't helping. They were going to lose it, and just like that, the opportunity slid across the table like fate, was finally ready to play fair. I bought the house. I bought it under my name, using my savings and a silent smirk. And when the deed was done, I showed up on their porch for the first time in 6 years with a printed lease agreement. $1,800 a month, due on the 1st. Late fees apply. I'd always imagined going back would feel like victory. It didn't when I pulled into the driveway. The house looked smaller, dimmer. The siding was peeling. The front porch sagged a little. And the flower bed my mom once kept immaculate had been overrun by weeds. Time had done to the house what bitterness had done to the people inside it. It eroded the edges until all that remained was something hollow. I stepped out of my car and ran my fingers across the keyring in my pocket. I owned this house. The deed was in my name. I'd bought it clean, legally, fairly. They'd defaulted. The bank didn't care about family ties, and neither did I. Dad answered the door in an old flannel shirt and stained jeans. He looked older, smaller. His hair had thinned out, and the fire in his eyes that used to intimidate me had dulled into something murky. "What the hell are you doing here?" he asked, blinking like he thought I was a ghost. I held up a folder. "I came to deliver your lease." Jason stepped into view behind him, beer in hand, barefoot. "Lease?" he scoffed. "The hell are you talking about?" I stepped inside uninvited and placed the folder on the old coffee table, the same one Mom used to polish every Saturday morning. "I bought the house." The words floated in the air like gunpowder before a spark. Dad blinked. "You? What?" "You let it go. You stopped paying. I found out through the county records, and I bought it, cash." They stood frozen. Jason looked like he was about to say something smart, so I raised my voice before he could. "I'm not kicking you out. You can stay, but it's $1,800 a month. Utilities not included. You'll find the terms inside. I suggest you read it." Jason laughed, but it was empty. "You're joking. You can't." "I can, and I did." He stepped forward like he thought he could intimidate me. "You little snake, after everything Dad did for you, after what?" I snapped. "After he stole my inheritance, after you wrecked the truck it bought, after I worked for years to get back what Mom left me." They were quiet. "For the first time in years, I had power, not revenge. Power, you want to stay," I said, crossing my arms. "You pay, just like any other tenant." Dad looked down at the lease and didn't speak. Jason swore under his breath and walked out the back door. It took 2 weeks for them to sign. They tried everything in between: emotional appeals, angry phone calls, a late-night voicemail from Jason slurring through accusations. At one point, Dad even tried to call it a gift, saying it wasn't theft, it was reallocation. But none of it worked. I didn't flinch. I was ready to evict them. I even had a lawyer review the paperwork just in case. Eventually, they signed. First rent payment was late, of course. Late fee, then external storms lose their power over you. $75. Jason flipped, said I was heartless. I reminded him that my heart had been ripped out 6 years ago when I stood at that kitchen table and learned the price of loyalty in our family. By month 3, they were limping. Jason's truck had broken down again, transmission problems. He wanted to use rent money to fix it. I reminded him that tenants with overdue rent get notices. Dad said nothing. In fact, Dad had grown unusually quiet. Maybe it was the shame, maybe it was age. Maybe it was the slow realization that the golden child he'd stolen for wasn't golden anymore, and the one he'd dismissed had built something stronger than metal and chrome. I remodeled the upstairs, turned it into a studio, and rented it out for $1,300 a month. Suddenly, I wasn't just breaking even, I was profiting. The money wasn't the point, though. The point was this: I rebuilt what they tore down. They used my inheritance to give Jason 4 wheels and a big ego. I used my scars to buy the roof over their heads. It was the sweetest kind of justice, quiet, professional, and perfectly legal. They had no choice but to stay. They couldn't afford anything else. Every check they wrote to me wasn't just money. It was an apology they didn't know how to say. It was rent paid on the house my mother once filled with warmth. It was mine again. I started painting again in the evenings, something I hadn't done since I was a teen. I used the little upstairs sunroom and played the music Mom used to love: Fleet, Woodmac, Simon and Garfunkel, A Little Carole King. It brought her back to me. In that quiet space, surrounded by my own success, I let myself feel proud. Not angry, not spiteful, just peaceful. They had taken my inheritance, but they hadn't taken my future. I reclaimed that myself. People think revenge is loud, explosive, full of shouting, slammed doors, dramatic confrontations. But the real kind, the kind that cuts the deepest, is slow. It's quiet. It looks like paperwork, like monthly invoices, like silence where there used to be fire. It's a third missed rent payment in a row. It's the sound of a truck not starting in the morning. It's watching them shrink. By the 6th month, my father had started to unravel, not in any obvious way. He didn't cry or lash out, but he aged fast. The lines on his face grew deeper, the bags under his eyes permanent. There was a time he barked commands like a general. Now he just nodded when I emailed him late notices. We hardly spoke face to face. Our relationship had been reduced to tenant and landlord. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was the man who once said, "My roof, my rules." Now my roof cost him $1,800 a month. Jason wasn't faring any better. The truck, the same one that used up my inheritance, was in ruins, leaking fluids, bald tires. He couldn't afford repairs, let alone insurance. I passed it on the street one day and saw a parking ticket tucked under the windshield wiper. He'd started Ubering in Dad's old sedan. He didn't talk about the truck anymore. Some part of me waited for an apology, but it never came. What came instead were passive-aggressive emails, missed payments, and excuses. "The heater's acting up. You gonna fix it, or are you just gonna keep counting our rent checks? The water pressure is low. Didn't know you were turning into a slumlord." I responded like a professional every time. I kept it boring, because nothing infuriates entitled men more than being treated like a line item. One Sunday morning, Jason cornered me on the front lawn while I was trimming the hedge. "You think this makes you better than us?" he asked. I didn't look up. "No, I know it does." He stepped forward, anger swelling. "You've got no right." I stood up and faced him. "I had every right you took from me. Now you're paying it back." His jaw clenched. "It wasn't like that, Dad. Dad did what he had to." "No," I said. "Dad did what he wanted to. You got a truck. I got silence. You got praise. I got ignored. He stole from me, Jason, and you let him." He opened his mouth to respond, but there was nothing there. "Just air and ego. You're lucky I didn't press charges," I said flatly. He stepped back like I'd slapped him. "But you wouldn't do that to your own family," he muttered. I looked at him for a long moment. "Family doesn't steal from each other. Remember that next time you call yourself my brother." Winter hit hard that year. One of the pipes froze and burst in the basement. I had it fixed within 24 hours. Sent them the update, no thanks. In fact, they never thanked me for anything. Not for keeping the rent lower than market rate, not for the repairs, not for letting them stay at all. Entitlement doesn't say thank you. It just complains when you stop giving. By Christmas, Jason was behind again. He texted me asking for an extension. "Just a few weeks," he wrote. "Things are tight." I sent a brief reply. "Payment terms are in your lease. I'll waive the late fee once, but rent is due by the 10th. He didn't respond. 3 days later, I saw him outside the house, pacing, smoking, wearing the same hoodie he'd had in college. The truck was still sitting in the driveway, covered in snow like a gravestone. I stared at it for a while. That hunk of metal had once cost me everything. My mother's last gift, my safety net, my trust. Now it sat rusting in the cold. Poetic, really. I was thriving while they decayed. My rental business was growing. I had 2 more units downtown. A third on the horizon. My credit score was immaculate, and I had a savings account for the first time in years. Therapy helped too. Helped me process that the goal wasn't to hurt them. It was to free myself, because revenge, for all its sweetness, isn't sustainable. Eventually, you have to decide if you're going to live in bitterness or build something better. But that doesn't mean I let them off the hook. Because healing doesn't require forgetting, and justice doesn't require forgiveness. Late January, I got a knock on my door. It was Dad. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired a nap could fix, the kind that builds over years of pride and poor choices. He started, then paused. I wanted to say, I know we weren't fair to you. I leaned against the doorframe and let the silence stretch. He cleared his throat. I didn't protect what was yours. I let Jason talk me into something stupid. I thought it would all work out. You thought he'd be something. I said quietly. He nodded, and I didn't think you needed anyone. That hurt more than anything, because he was right. He never thought I needed anyone. He'd mistaken quiet for strength, silence for resilience. He stepped back, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry, it wasn't much, but it was something. I closed the door without saying anything, because some apologies come too late. And some wounds deserve the dignity of a scar, not a bandage. Justice, I learned, isn't about revenge. It's about restoration. It's about reclaiming what was stolen. Not just money, but dignity and peace. By spring, the house had changed. The paint was fresh, the hedges trimmed, the porch no longer sagged. The home my mother, once built with warmth and care, finally reflected the energy she deserved. Not chaos, not neglect, but pride. I'd renovated the kitchen, added new windows, and had the roof repaired before the rains came. I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it because this house, despite everything, was still sacred to me. Even if the people inside it no longer were. Jason moved out in April. He'd fallen 4 months behind on rent. I gave him formal notice. He didn't even fight it. Maybe he finally understood he'd lost. Or maybe the weight of the broken truck, the Mac, stout credit cards, and a lifetime of being bailed out finally caught up to him. He left without saying goodbye. Just one morning, the driveway was empty and his room abandoned. I found the keys on the kitchen counter. No note, no thank you, no apology. Typical. My father remained. He kept paying rent, on time, every month, without fail. We didn't talk much. When we did, it was transactional. He'd ask if the plumber was scheduled. I'd say yes. He'd mention the heater made a noise. I'd send someone out. Tenant and landlord, nothing more. But in the quiet, I noticed something shift. He stopped challenging me, stopped pretending like he was still in charge. It was subtle, but it was there. An acceptance. One evening in May, I found him sitting on the porch where my mom used to drink tea in the mornings. I was walking up the driveway, groceries in hand, when he said, "Your mother would have been proud of you." I stopped. He didn't look at me, just stared at the sky like he was seeing something I couldn't. "You took what we ruined and made something better." I didn't respond. Just nodded and went inside. I didn't need validation from him. Not anymore. But the truth was, I believed him. That summer, I hosted a small gathering at the house. Just a few close friends, some wine, a lot of laughter. We sat in the backyard under fairy lights, the air warm and soft, and I realized I was happy, not because they were suffering, but because I wasn't anymore. The pain no longer owned me. I had reclaimed every part of my story. Jason emailed me once in July. Just one line, "You gonna forgive us one day?" I never replied, because forgiveness isn't something owed. It's not a favor, it's a gift. One I didn't feel like giving, maybe one day, maybe not. What mattered more was that I forgave myself for staying silent, for doubting my worth, for thinking I had to earn love that should have been unconditional. It's been 2 years now. I've expanded my real estate holdings. I've helped other people who were once where I was confused, robbed, hurting, to find their footing again. I even started a small fund in my mother's name to help underprivileged youth access college resources. Because that's what she would have wanted. That's what she tried to give me. Her legacy was never meant to be a truck. It was meant to be freedom, and I finally gave it back to myself. Sometimes I still pass Jason's old truck. It was towed to a salvage yard just outside town. I saw it once, rusted in sun, bleached, parts stripped. That's all it ever was, a machine, temporary. Flashy, empty, and I realize now. I was never really mourning the money. I was mourning the trust that was shattered. The belief that family wouldn't hurt me like that. But life has a way of balancing scales. They pay $1,800 a month to live in the house they once ruled like kings. And I wake up every day knowing I built something stronger than their greed.